I can't believe I've been deceived for 22 years. My son, angrier than I am, is currently lashing out at the other party. Let's start with the basics. I'm 48, self-employed, making around $90,000 a year. My wife is a company employee, making just under $40,000 a year. We have a 22-year-old son who's in college and a 24-year-old daughter who's working. My son is studying forensic science at university and apparently did a DNA test as part of a class or something. He took a swab from me and my wife's mouths, saying it was needed for class or something, half-jokingly. A few days later, my son contacted me saying we needed to talk. Over drinks at a bar, he asked me tearfully, "Am I actually my mom's child from a previous relationship?" I responded, "Impossible! We have pictures of you when you were born at home, don't we?" My son silently handed over some paperwork. Though the paper was filled with various numbers, the bottom line was that there was a 99% probability that my son and I weren't related. I was dumbfounded and asked my son, "Are you sure?" before finally managing to say, "Regardless of blood ties, you're still my precious child." It took a lot for me to say that. We went home together and confronted my wife. Initially, she feigned ignorance, but after my son grabbed her by the collar and yelled, "Tell the truth, you old hag," she realized that she couldn't lie away and began telling the truth. Crying, she explained that 2 years into our marriage, she went on a business trip with her boss and ended up having an affair with him there. She knew it was wrong, but she found the affair exciting and kept it going. She fell for his line, "Let's get a divorce and be together." I was dumbstruck by the betrayal of my wife that I never knew. She found out she was pregnant with my son around that time, but wasn't sure whose child it was, so she honestly considered abortion. When she told her lover about the pregnancy, he was initially thrilled. However, it turned out that his own wife was also pregnant at the same time, so when she confronted him, he shoved some money at her and ran away. Because I noticed her pregnancy and was happy about it, she felt she had no choice but to keep the child. She made some excuses after that, but our daughter told her, "I don't even want to call you mom, you're the worst kind of person," and she broke down crying. We managed to extract some information about her lover from her. Apparently, he's still an executive at the company where she works. I confiscated her phone and looked through it, but I didn't find anything suspicious. She says she hasn't had any contact with him since he ran away after she told him about the pregnancy. However, while searching her bedroom, we found an envelope at the bottom of her makeup box. "If you tell anyone at work or your husband about us, you won't have a future. Keep quiet and you'll be taken care of," read a note in it. My son, trembling as he read the note, said, "Dad, you're still my dad, right?" He burst into tears, gripped my hand tightly, and said, "I'm going to do something unfilial. I might even have to drop out of school. I hope you can forgive me." Then he shouted at my wife, "Tell me where that bastard lives." When I asked, "What are you planning to do?" he replied, "I'm going to kill the other guy." Furious, I yelled back, "That's my job. You just watch what I do." I then told my wife, "Write down his name, address, and phone number," and handed her a piece of paper. My wife pleaded, "Please spare me that. It won't end well for both of us." So I responded, "You reap what you sow," and went to fetch the company directory from her bookshelf. "Point out his name in this directory," I said as I handed it to her. Seeing my unusual demeanor, my wife seemed to resign herself and pointed out a name. I checked the name, then quietly closed the directory. I then called my father-in-law to report the situation. My in-laws promised to rush over immediately. Meanwhile, my son, daughter, and I had an emergency family meeting. We agreed that even if I wasn't his biological father, my son was still my son and a precious brother to my daughter. The consensus was to kick my wife out as soon as possible. About half an hour later, my in-laws arrived. The moment they saw my wife, my father-in-law, despite being well over 70, delivered a resounding front kick. My wife went flying. Next, a flurry of slaps rained down on my wife's back from my mother-in-law. Somehow, managing to separate them, the two then apologized profusely. "We didn't ask you to come here just to do that," I said, trying to calm them down and eventually succeeding in getting them to raise their heads. We then informed them of our family's meeting's decision and asked them to take my wife away as soon as possible. However, my mother-in-law shouted, "Absolutely not! We won't take such a shameless woman into our home. From this moment on, we sever all ties with you. Go wherever you want." I calmly asked her, "First, we'll deal with the guy she cheated on me with. I think we'll deal with her after that. I know it sounds bad, but could you please keep an eye on her for us, as if she's in prison?" I bowed my head. Although my mother-in-law seemed unhappy, she agreed to comply with my father-in-law's words. "We can kick her out any time. Let's just keep her as an outsider for now." During our discussion, my daughter, who was packing my wife's change of clothes, threw the bag next to my wife, saying, "This is the last thing I'll do for you," with a chilling tone. My wife kept crying and screaming, "No, this is my house. I don't want to leave my family. I'll do anything, so don't kick me out." But she was dragged to my in-laws' car by my son and daughter. By that time, it was 2 in the morning. Even though I was probably not going to sleep, I went to bed to rest and think about what to do next. In the end, I didn't sleep at all, but when the sun started to rise, I got out of bed. I looked at the directory, noted down the name, address, and phone number of the other man, sat down on a chair, and seemed to doze off a bit with my eyes closed. I didn't realize it then, but my son seemed to have taken a peek at the note while I was asleep. I was contemplating the day ahead, enjoying the breakfast my daughter had prepared for me before heading off to work, when my son said, "Dad, I'm going to school. Let's have another meeting tonight," and left the house 2 hours earlier than usual. My son left home and headed straight for the house of his mother's lover. Apparently, the guy was also at home, yet to leave for work. Upon reaching, my son announced at the doorstep, "I am the child you made outside your marriage." The guy, of course, couldn't make heads or tails of the situation and responded, "I don't have any child outside my marriage." To which my son retorted, "Then what's this?" He flung an envelope at the guy, screaming his mother's name. The guy blanched and started shaking, trying to push my son out the door, saying, "Not here, let's go outside." But my son wouldn't have it. "My family's been destroyed and you want to run away?" he shouted, causing the man's wife and kids to appear. My son apparently lashed out at the other man's wife, who was screaming, "I'm calling the cops," saying, "Go ahead and call them, I'll spill everything your husband did." The other man's wife, struck by these words, responded, "All right, let's calm down and talk about this," and apparently invited him inside. There, my son explained that he was the child of the other man and his mother, that his mother had already been kicked out, and that if they needed proof, he would perform a DNA test with the other man and ask to collect a sample. He even showed them what was in the envelope. The wife, shooting daggers at her husband, stated, "This is all news to me. I cannot respond right now, but rest assured, I will get back to you. Please leave for today." And they exchanged their number before parting ways. Later, the man's wife called me, and that's how I found out what my son had done. The guy claimed to have no remorse since the affair happened over 20 years ago and it was just a fling. He said he has no business with the child since it was my wife who decided to give birth. In response, I said, "This isn't about a statute of limitations. The problem here is that he impregnated a woman knowing full well that she was married. If he thinks this is some game, then I'll show him that I can play better. I am divorcing my wife and your husband is the cause. Please be prepared." The wife was silent throughout, but at the end she admitted, "You have every right to be angry. I have also decided to divorce after hearing your side." The next day, I visited the guy's house. "I am truly sorry for what my husband has done." "No, not only my wife, but even my son did something outrageous." We apologized to each other. The guy, however, suggested at the meeting, "Bringing up something from 20 plus years ago will only make us all miserable. Can't we just forget this?" and presented a hefty envelope. In response, I shoved the envelope back and stated, "You think you can just silence us with money without even an apology? You've made my decision easier. We'll resort to legal means for retribution. Expect an official letter once my lawyer is ready." And with that, I left the meeting. To his wife I said, "You have every right to sue my wife for damages. Don't hold back." To which she responded quietly, "It happened over 20 years ago. I don't intend to. Moreover, I have my own divorce settlement to deal with." Soon after, I secured a lawyer through a friend. By the way, my wife's company locally was well known. There are many people in the neighborhood who work for that company, and I approached one of them, an executive, and had him leak this incident. Apparently, he's been isolated and blamed quite a bit in board meetings. My wife is currently suspended from work, and it looks like she'll be forced to resign. My demands against my wife's affair partner are $100,000 in damages, each for me and my son. Additionally, every cent spent since my son was born. This was my son's wish, by the way. I don't expect to receive everything, but at this point, it's a matter of pride. Apparently, having an affair can be disadvantageous in court later, and he's hired a lawyer who's desperately trying to reduce the amount. I've told my lawyer clearly that I won't accept any reduction. As for my wife, I'll deal with her once this matter is settled.